TATA, the industrial group responsible for most of India's success on the world market. The Tata Group has been a market pioneer in several Indian sectors for almost 2 centuries and continues to be so today. You may be familiar with Tata Motors, their automobile division, but as you'll quickly discover, its reach goes much beyond that one subsidiary. In this video, we cover 3 generations of businessmen from the Tata family to learn how they created one of India's most successful companies. Tata's story starts off during the rule of the British Empire. India was a major cotton exporter at the time, but local businesses had limited room to grow under the brutal British East India Company administration. A British Raj was established in 1857, in place of the British East India Company after a rebellion against the British in response to their mistreatment. The Raj was now much more focused in maintaining peace than its brutal predecessor. The Raj spent a lot of money, for example, on the construction of India's first railways, while also not exploiting the Indian population as badly. The British Raj was still an oppressive colonial power, of course, but at least it finally provided the local population with the means to progress economically. The first Indian businessmen, including Jamsetji Tata, came from the exporting industry because India was an exporting nation. He graduated in 1858, now in time to benefit from the British Raj's economic reforms. He was the son of an exporter in Mumbai. Jamsetji traveled to Hong Kong in 1859 to establish a subsidiary because his father's export business was expanding, and after viewing the huge size of British trade there, he understood that the Tata export firm had truly global potential. He would visit China, Japan, and the UK over the course of the following 10 years in order to build a distribution network for his father's company. In 1868, he finally established his own exporting firm, and with the profits, he began constructing his own textile mills, effectively developing a vertically integrated business. Jamsetji's concept was to locate the best techniques being used around the world and bring them back to India from the very beginning. He adopted practices in his textile mills that were essentially unknown to the majority of India, like providing illness benefits and pensions to his workers. Jamsetji, however, wasn't satisfied with just the textile sector. He was inspired by the wonders the Industrial Revolution had created in Europe and wanted to bring them to his own country. In 1901, he started working on a steel production plant that was based on the ones he had visited in Germany. His hydroelectric project, which was influenced by his trip to the Niagara Falls power plant in 1903, was even more ambitious. Jamsetji established a network of hotels, beginning with the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, one of Mumbai's most famous buildings even today. After realizing the great potential of tourism, Jamsetji really appreciated education to the extent that he donated land and buildings to the establishment of the Indian Institute of Science, the top university in India. He was a man who was committed to business and to assisting people through it. However, due to his untimely death in 1904 while on a business trip in Germany, leaving the already large Tata Company to his 2 sons, he would not live to see the majority of his projects completed. They united their resources and combined their ownership into a single holding company, which is now controlled by the charity trusts they established for upcoming generations. Many of Jamsetji's goals were achieved by his sons, who managed the establishment of India's first steelworks in 1907, its first cement plant in 1912, and its first indigenous insurance company in 1919. Tata's sons had 14 distinct businesses when the next generation took up the responsibilities of leadership in 1938. But this time, instead of going to one of Jamsetji's grandsons, the keys of power were given to a distant cousin with an interesting background. Despite having been raised in France and working for the corporation since 1925, Jahangir Tata, also known as JRD, was good friends with the pilot of the first flight across the English Channel. In other words, JRD had a strong interest in flying, and in 1929 he obtained India's first pilot's license. Unsurprising that his first major task at Tata was to create an airline. He founded the Tata Air Service in 1932. At first, it just carried mail, but in 1938, it began operating passenger flights as well, even supporting the British during the Second World War. You may think that the Tatas would have benefited from India's 1947 independence, but in actuality, the socialist policies of the new government were in opposition to the goals of the private sector. When India's first Prime Minister realized how successful JRD had been with his airline, he made the decision to nationalize it on his own in 1953. He kept JRD as the airline's chairman until 1977. As you can guess, the company only went downhill from there, drowning in ever-increasing debt. Of course, JRD would not allow politics to interfere with business, so he tried to expand Tata while avoiding the socialists' anger. In 1945, he founded Tata Motors with the intention of building locomotives. But in 1954, he expanded into the production of commercial cars as a result of a partnership with the German automaker Daimler. JRD managed the growth of the Tata Group from 14 to 95 companies during his 52 years in office. But in order to do so, he had to drastically reduce the percentage of ownership Tata Sons owned in each company in order to win over the socialists. Even though Tata was far from a monopoly by Western definitions, the Indian government created the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act in 1960.